And I was kind of surprised from some of the findings, right? Where I was like, always thought every car manufacturer would go down the Tesla road and say, we're going to do our own insurance. But that's not true universally, right? Some of them are also still open. And I think this is also good news for us as an insurance industry to partnerships and bring in really the expertise that we can offer as insurers in shaping the future mobility offerings that we want to bring to the market, and not just leave it to Elon Musk's and the others in this world to figure that out for us. Hey, my name is Lars Boeing. I'm a vice president at Capgemini, and this is the future of insurance.
Lars, it's really good to sit down with you. I've gotten some time with the team behind the thing we're going to talk about, but I haven't gotten time with you. And I'm interested, before we jump in, tell people who you are and kind of how you got to where you are. And then I want to talk about the World Property and Casualty Report for 2023.
Yeah, Brian, it's a pleasure to be with you. So my name is Lars Boeing. I work with Capgemini in the insurance space. I've been working in the financial services industry for, I shouldn't say that, but more than 23 years now. I am originally from Germany, started my career there at smaller boutique consulting firms, moved into the industry, came back to consulting, and then moved to the US in 2017. I live and love in New York, and I've been working in insurance here in the US ever since, mostly on the P&C side, some of the life side. And yeah, I think we have interesting times ahead of us. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about that today.
Well, and yeah, I mean, that is what I want to talk about. And obviously, it's the nature of the show as a whole. But I told you before we recorded, I was actually giddy when I read this report. And it was so different from what I tend to see is, there's a lot of sort of future talk about where the industry's going. And I think often it's so protected from the chance of being wrong because the dates are so far out, or they almost leaves things so intangible that you almost couldn't understand what the idea is to know if it was right or wrong. But then the other part of it is, even if the vision is clear, so what? What do I do with that? What are the things I need to be thinking about right now? And that's the tough moments, because none of the stuff is here yet. And so people don't always see the burning platform that tells you must change. So you're almost trying to get people to have the will to buy into, look, you need to evolve your business before the need has even presented itself, which is a tough thing. And I feel like this report really sets that up nicely. And I'm biased because I'm quoted in it. But even if I wasn't, honestly, I think it was fantastic work. And so I am very excited to dig into this with you. Can you give people just a sense of what is this report? What's the intention of it? And why is Capgemini doing this?
Yeah, so first off, thanks for the shout out. I hope at least already at this point, people are Googling it and downloading the report before I even go into it. But yeah, this is a report that we have been publishing for years now. And we try to look at different themes that will inform and shape the industry. Like last year, we had a world report on climate change and how it will affect insurers. And I mean, just the recent headlines of some carriers pulling out of certain states and not insuring property anymore shows that we weren't that wrong with bringing that message. And this year we looked at particular how mobility will change the insurance industry, and not in the scenarios that we all know. Hey, I get into a self-autonomous vehicle, there's a collision, my claim happens, I get a substitute vehicle, send right away, all the great scenarios that we can all spin up. But really, what does it mean, as you said, today? What should I do as a carrier today to prepare for that mobility market evolution that we see is happening? And then how do you shift as an insurer from pure auto insurance as an asset insurance to really something more mobility protection, which can mean a lot of different things. And that's where I think the innovation will hopefully start around what does it mean? Do I insure a travel? Is it a travel insurance that secures everything that I do throughout my travel? Is it something different because I might not own the car anymore because I'm sharing these things? And there's these micro mobilities happening. Even me, at my age, I'm able to change. My wife gifted me an e-scooter here in New York.
Wow.
Scooter rentals are forbidden, but I was always like excited when we went to places where we had them. So for my birthday, she gifted me one. I was like, really excited to get it. And now I'm using it to commute to work every day in the summer. I
Yeah.
won't do it in the winter time, but it's changing my pattern of how I travel, right? I don't commute with the subway anymore. I'm exposed to different risks, and especially in New York,
Yes.
that means a lot of things. So that's really what we look at in this report. And lastly, we also try to look at how do you really move from being just a product developer or product amender, if you will, because no real innovation has happened in insurance for a long, long time, to becoming a solution co-designer where you work with others to help you build better products, better solutions for your customers
Yeah.
and your insured.
I I think the last one is fascinating, and amender, iterator. That is what we are. And I mean, you put the product out, and then it's the cycle of all the regulatory changes every year, whether you're different countries or states or whatever. It actually defines our mindset. And I think a lot of us, we don't really recognize that we're being trained to think iteratively instead of really rethinking the whole space. And that is I think, a major holdback for the industry. Do you think that there's a way for us to shift our thinking and our structure there?
Yeah, I think you already touched upon some of the things that are holding us back. I know that a lot of people in the industry are excited about innovation, but then sometimes we are in our little box, and then the innovation that we bring is really more so, hey, we now have UBI products for auto, which is great, right? But it's addressing just one aspect of it, which is the pricing aspect of
Yeah.
it, for the premium and the risk underwriting aspect of it. But and we have thought about this also with another insurer, is how do you build a offering around this where insurance is a layer in it. We talk about embedded insurance a lot. So how do
Yeah.
you embed insurance in a service offering that you can provide to somebody that really takes care of? And I mentioned that earlier, maybe ensuring your whole journey, right? If I there was a company back in Germany that was founded by Mercedes-Benz at that time when it really first started. Car sharing and all these things came up. Unfortunately, they don't exist any longer. But they really were looking at orchestrating your travel from A to B
Mhm.
and optimizing the different parts of your journey along the way, be it your car, be it a plane, be it a boat, whatever it might be, and orchestrate and then also facilitate that journey. And if we think about mobility that way, then there's obviously a lot of potential for innovation in there as well. When you think about how I am or how can I be as an insurer useful to my insured by not only providing the safety net that if something goes wrong, I'm protected, but also already starting with, I can help you find the best travel partners. I can make sure that everything where you're going is safe, using the insights and data that I have to really provide that service. So I
Yeah.
think there's, just like you said, because we are so regulatory biased, we tend to not think outside the box. But right now, I know that a lot of people are excited about this, and a lot of people want to break the boundaries of that box.
Yeah. It does seem like this is a moment where the energy is starting to be there. I think if you're a current writer of motor auto insurance, depending what country you're on, you call it one or the other, you come back to this: we insure an asset, and it's pretty hefty insurance. And what you're talking about is lots of different experiences at very small premium. So they're looking at, in the US, maybe $1,200 a year or $1,000 a year, whatever it might be per vehicle, versus $18 or $27 or 40 to, maybe on the high end, $120 for like a long flight. So they're like, well, that doesn't compare. And to me, I had this conversation last week. Um, it's a shift in the basis that you think about for the units of insurance, but I think the whole picture is much bigger than the $1,000 or 1,200. But if you keep looking at a discrete unit, you're never going to see it. And I think that's one of these shifts, is we're used to thinking in assets, and the world is moving more towards experiences. I mean, even SaaS, right? The asset was your software license, and now it's your usage of the stuff on an ongoing basis. The kind of the unit of exposure is changing.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon one of the things that we discussed in our report, right? So first off, the nature of what we, what we're going to insure is different, but also with the, more vehicles, and we call them ACE. So it's autonomous, it is electric, and these kind of these things, connected and then shared, is also one of the categories that we bring. We believe that this market has tremendous opportunity in growing. So, and the good news is, because it's a very young market and immature market, if you start investing today and you're starting innovating in there, there is a lot of opportunity to grow. We predict that this market segment, or overall globally, will grow by about 8 times from where it is today. So very significant growth. While the traditional auto motor insurance, whatever you want to call it, is still there. It still has its reason to be there. It is still something that will exist also in the future. It will not go away. But the amount of growth is very limited from what it is today, because we really see the trajectory going in the other direction. And so what you just said is one of the aspects that we look at, how it will be different, right? The underlying that you covered goes from asset to also journeys. And there's a big question of liability. Who is the owner of the liability, right? Especially with autonomous cars. That's a big question, and that has not been solved for so far. And then there is also the nature of the risk that you're looking at, because today it's more or less, if you want, personal injury and liability stuff. But in the future, it is not only personal injury, but it's also the algorithms that the car uses, right? Cybersecurity, because the more connected cars can be easily hacked. And I think we've all seen these scare videos of people taking over control of Teslas and other cars that are very connected to the world. So that will change, and that, back to your original question, will also need insurance innovation. Right? How do I bring that all into one product, if you will, or multiple products?
It is fascinating when you really stop and think. There's the one side is like a single auto policy versus all these mobility related moments of coverage, whether they're a single product covering it all or pieces or whatever. But then, even as you're saying, if it's a personal risk today with personal motor, is it a commercial risk tomorrow because now it's product liability, or the shared pods, or GM Cruise is all the pods and you don't have a car? There's questions like that. Well, if you're a personal motor heavy carrier today, if you're not starting to think about that, you don't have a market, or it's so much smaller that you don't have enough of a market to support your business anymore. So do you need to think about adding commercial capabilities? Do you become a reinsurer? I mean, there's so many interesting questions. From the practical standpoint or the action standpoint, what are the kinds of things that you're recommending to industry players right now to be considering or even taking steps on before? Because I liken it to driving off a cliff. Is like, at some point you either will go off the cliff or someone will jerk the wheel for you. This is still the time where you get to choose how you're going to avoid that cliff. So what are some of the things that you're telling people, these are the steps you should be taking or considering to set yourself up?
Right. So there's 4 key areas that we believe carriers should be thinking about. One is, and I think that's the biggest thing to address right now. What is the value proposition that you want to bring to the market in the future, right? I mean, I think you said it nicely. I can stay in my lane and be the auto motor carrier for traditional auto. That's completely something you can do. But what you really need to have is a clear business strategy that you base on actual customer behavior. I think for the longest time in insurance, we have believed that we know better than anybody how to behave, and that's how we have created our product. But we have seen, especially expedited by COVID, a change in customer behavior and how people look at these things, right? There is a lot of what we call transfer of your own expectations that you have from interacting with digital natives like Amazon, Netflix, or whatever, to then also other parts where you interact digitally, if you will, right? Insurance, banking, whatever it might be. And you say, why is it not that flawless? So value proposition really based on customer behavior is important. Yeah. The other one is really then what you just said is, how do I need to reinvent my value proposition with that in mind to have a new business model that will help me drive these things forward? And then that leads into, if I have a new business model, what does it mean for my culture and my overall organization? What kind of talents do I need to have? And these things, when it really comes about servicing that value proposition that I have there. And especially and I think I touched upon this when I said we are moving away from, being the only partner that provides a solution, but to more of an ecosystem kind of approach. How do I work in that ecosystem successfully and see others not just as vendors, but really as partners that help me build a product? Yeah. So that's, I think, ecosystem is one of the key areas. The other piece is, and we touched upon that briefly, is technology. How do you enable your technology to really connect to different data sources, to different solution providers? And how do you build a functionality that is, I want to call it like an integration layer, where you can plug and play different solution providers, different data sources into it seamlessly, that I bring it in without a lot of pain. We remember all the old times of being on mainframe systems, and connecting a new data source was a painful experience, right? Yeah. But these days we're talking about API layers, we talk about containerization and these things. And modern systems like Guidewire, Duck Creek enable that, actually. So where am I in that space? And then on the other hand, it's the risk management piece, right? These new products, they need to be managed also more dynamically, because I get a lot more insights and data from, hopefully from connected devices and whatnot else. I can enable a better claims experience, straight through processing, all the things that we already see in its infant stages. Yeah. And then goes back to the co-creation, co-innovation on the value-added services. So these are the aspects, if you want to go value proposition, ecosystem, technology, and risk management, the 4 areas that you need to touch on.
And you do go into a lot of detail, but it's also very clear, and I appreciated that. One thing I wanted to hit on before we go is the perspectives that you brought in, and not just mine. I got to be part of what was a very broad, diverse group of people from literally across the world, lots of different perspectives. I don't know if it's okay if I name them or not, so I'll say it more generically, but you even had one of the major, one of the 3 largest car companies in the world, their head of insurance. So, when you talk about connected and embedded, you can't talk about that without including, I guess Mercedes now, GM, Ford, Stellantis, all of these players, because they're all thinking about this stuff directly, with generally $20 to $30 billion in revenue projected in their connected and software services, which includes their insurance business. So these are, poised to be larger than most personal lines P&C carriers today. You brought all that perspective in, and it was fascinating for me to be part of those meetings and hear that. But I do think when you're talking about all this stuff, it's not just sort of future seeing. You really did bring in a really broad perspective. And it has to be really interesting to get to do that work. But I appreciated that you called out to the industry and people who would be on board with everything you're saying, but also people who probably wouldn't be. You did have, there was no fighting or anything, but you did have a really wide range of viewpoints and all this stuff.
Yeah, I think especially in this topic, which is so amorph still, right? I think it's really important to bring in different, as you said, different perspectives, different experiences,
Yeah.
and different points of views from all over the world to make sure that we look at it from all possible angles. Because right now, it's a playing field that is still in development. And so bringing in these pieces, and we really appreciate you, Brian, also contributing. And if people download the report and look at it, I mean, I highly um, encourage people to do that. You will see that we have, basically representatives from the insurance companies across the globe, insurtechs, and also partners like AWS and whatever, who also brought in their own perspectives. And then obviously also, as you mentioned, automotive and other representatives that brought that in perspective. And it was a really interesting time in these conversations and interviews, and then also discussing these insights afterwards to make sense of that, which helped us also look at it from, and I was kind of surprised from some of the findings, right? Where I was like, always thought everybody would go down the Tesla road, like every OEM, like every car manufacturer would go down the Tesla road and say, we're going to do our own insurance. But that's not true universally, right? Some of them are also still open. And I think this is also good news for us as in the insurance industry, to partnerships and bring in really the expertise that we can offer as insurers in shaping the future mobility offerings that we want to bring to the market, and not just leave it to Elon Musk's and the others in this world to figure that out for us.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not in any of those boardrooms, so I don't know. But my view was, I don't think most of them will capitalize their own carriers, because they have the money, but it's really tied up in R&D and physical plant and all kinds of other things that are about the core of their business. And insurance is a facilitator of their business and something that can stand in the way of them achieving their strategic objectives, but it's not the core of their business. So if you're going to deploy your capital, I think good leadership knows not to deploy it in these ancillary things that have to be smooth for your core to work. You have to deploy to the core, but you build the right partnerships and mechanisms to facilitate. Doesn't mean no one will, Elon Musk included, but to me, that's not the right use of capital. So, I was very curious to hear with the automotive representatives there, what's their take on it. But if the URL was easier to say, I would say, well, where can people find this? But I know it's a long URL, but I'm going to put a link in the show notes, and I'm going to put it on the bottom of the screen. And I'm also going to set up an easy redirect for people, just future-of-insurance.com/Capgemini. And I will put that here so they can get to it very easily. It's free, which is, thank you for that. They should go and download it. It's fantastic, really, really valuable report. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing, a bit about it. And hopefully people's appetites are wet and they're willing to go in and download it.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Really appreciate it and enjoyed our conversation. And I hope that people enjoy the report as much as we enjoyed it putting together.
Thank you to Lars for joining me to talk about the report. It's amazing. I really do think that, not just because they quoted me in it, I genuinely felt that way about the report. And that's part of why I was willing to be a part of the research that Capgemini was doing. I will link to the report in the show notes. And if you're watching this, you will see a link right there. You can also go to future-of-insurance.com/Capgemini, and I will redirect that to the right place on their sites. You can download it. It's free. I highly recommend it to get you all thinking about where the industry is going. That's the whole point of this work with the future of insurance, to get us all thinking about where the industry is going and how we go along with it, and maybe how we can push it to where it should go and direct it and stand by it and stand by the people that this industry is supposed to be there to protect and help make whole when things go wrong. It's all about the future of the industry. I hope you found this interesting. Definitely get the report. Check out more episodes of the show, and of course the book series and all the other ways trying to push ahead in the future of insurance. And I will see you all back next time. Thanks, everyone.